Can you guys
Over
see
to
this?
you, Aparna.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And welcome to this webinar on how to build or scale your career in DevOps. My name is Savinder Puri. I am the Global Head, Agile, DevSecOps, and Cloud Platform Solutions with Zensa Technologies. And I'm very happy to do this seminar for DevOps Institute. So as you can imagine, this is a pretty diverse topic. So I wanted to start with this slide, right? How am I qualified to give this talk? Who am I to talk about how to build or scale your DevOps career? So let me give you a bit of my introduction to start with. So I did my engineering in computer science all the way back in 2000. And over the last 20 years, I've been in the trenches, worked primarily across 3 continents, UK, Europe, US, and South Africa. And I'm currently the global ambassador at DevOps Institute and Continuous Delivery Foundation. Having spent a lot of time in services companies, I have interviewed thousands of candidates and I've seen hundreds of careers really take off and a lot of them not take off as well. Right. So over the years, I've built a bit of a perspective on what it takes to build a career in DevOps and what are some of the pitfalls that in my experience, I have seen people do, which have kind of hampered their careers. So I have a bit of a perspective there. Over these 20 years, I have worked for startups. I have worked for large scale enterprises. I have worked for services companies. I had a small consulting gig of my own. So I've kind of been around the room and seen a bit of the world. I've traveled extensively, as you can imagine. Outside of this, I've also managed to write a book on the same topic. It's available on Amazon worldwide. So that's my shameless little plug there. And on the spiritual side, I do something called Soul Hands. You can look it up on Instagram. That's where I dabble a little bit into spirituality, and that helps me maintain some sanity up here. So hopefully that gives you a perspective of where I'm coming from. Okay. So what is this DevOps thing really? Now, a lot of you probably are already in this field. Maybe some of you are thinking about dabbling into DevOps. So let's quickly cover this a bit. So this is a very famous diagram. You've probably seen this earlier, but DevOps is all of this and a lot more. The way I like to explain DevOps is whatever your explanation is, take a couple of steps back and try and look at the bigger elephant. That will give you a bigger perspective. What a lot of people really think about DevOps is this. Some voodoo magic. Some of you who are old enough to remember, this is Minority Report. The CI/CD perspective, continuous integration, developers creating code, whatever language, whatever technology that goes into version control, picked up by a continuous integration server, and that creating various build artifacts, could be a jar, var, a microservice, some sort of binary, configuration files, databases, zips, whatever format, and then continuous delivery, that getting deployed to various environments. Now, this is just a very, very simple example, 3-tier architecture. Today's world is a whole lot complicated. But that's basically continuous integration. Continuous delivery means getting this deployed onto an environment. Now, some people call this continuous delivery, some call this continuous deployment. The names are interchangeable depending on who you talk to. What's the evolution? Now, at level 2 of this picture, we saw stuff getting deployed to one environment. As things started getting complicated in the software industry, they said, hey, one app server isn't going to cut it. We need 10 of those. We need 100 of those. And then came in infrastructure automation. Why do you want to maintain these by hand? Let's have software do it. So that's when this, the VMware world entire opened up, and that's where the virtualization came in, where you came in with infrastructure automation. Then the next level is, hey, why do you need even one tin? Why do you need even one server? Even though one server can host multiple VMs, why do you need even all that? I'm just running a web server. I don't need the entire powerhouse of even a VM. I can run everything in a container. So that's where the entire container world came about. And in each virtual machine, I can spin up potentially hundreds of containers. So that's where the container virtualization came in. And when they really started spinning up those hundred of containers, they said, hey, how the heck do I maintain all of this? So that's where the Kubernetes, the Mesos, the Swarms, the Ranchers of the world came about. And then just when we thought, hey, this is fantastic, it isn't going to get any more complicated, somebody came up with a question, hey, why do I even need containers? Why do I even need to know where my stuff is running? Why do I even need to maintain all of this? Why can't we go serverless? Right? I just give it to the hyperscaler and they can run it wherever they want to run it. There are a couple more steps ahead of this, but for the sake of simplicity, this is how I've simplified it. Now, obviously, there are a lot of nuances at each stage, but this is a very simplistic 10,000 feet view on how the evolution of CI/CD has happened. Now, where's the cloud in this? As you can imagine, pretty much everywhere. Today, there are organizations where the developers are given dumb terminals. Those are terminals like in the old days, if you go and visit the railway booking center, when we used to go and visit them about maybe 20, 30 years back, those guys had a dumb terminal. There is no horsepower on that terminal. Everything is in the cloud. Even IDEs are being maintained in the cloud today. So all of that is already happening. And subsequently, each layer can be on the cloud. This is a beautiful representation. It's called the table of DevOps tools. It's maintained by Zebia Labs, who are now digital.ai. If you've not seen this, I would highly recommend just Google periodic table of DevOps tools and you will get this. What this talks about is one view of the tooling system out there, and the colors represent what kind of tooling we're talking about. For example, the orange one is database. So you have the MySQLs, the Postgres, the Mongos of the world, and so on and so forth. It kind of gives you a level of complexity that exists out there. Now, by no means is this an exhaustive list of all the tools out there. That's probably not even possible to put on a periodic table. There are thousands of tools in each area, but this gives you a good starting point. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is this. This is the DevSecOps reference architecture. The slide is complex. It's probably not even very readable. It's published by Sonatype, and they talk about this reference architecture. It's been there for a while. It gets updated every now and then. It's another fantastic piece of document to go have a look at. What this basically again tells you is the complexity of what we are talking about. And you pick up each set in this, each box in this, and there are multiple tools, technologies, multiple integration points. Also, depending on the technology stack that you're talking about, all of this vary, right? So just an idea to give you the complexity of a DevOps career, because as a DevOps professional, you will be dealing with some sort, some shape and form of this stuff. If this is what you're thinking, that's okay, because that is where everybody starts. I bring up this slide because this really, in my mind, crystallizes the way DevOps is supposed to operate. What is the nirvana of DevOps? And Netflix is a lot of the things that we use today, a lot of the technology that a lot of us use today in our jobs, in our companies, probably can trace back their origin to something done at either Netflix or Google or Facebook or one of those, technology leaders. And all of us are using Netflix today. And it's a platform that pretty much is extremely reliable. What is most important here is This is supported by tens of ops engineers, zero network ops centers. That is what is really, really interesting here. And the source of this is how Netflix thinks about DevOps. So you can look up this document. But what really that tells you is to be able to operate at the level of scale and complexity of Netflix, it doesn't take a million engineers working 24/7. It's not that. Now, of course, this has been developed and matured by extremely smart people over the years. Of course, that's given. But the point is that even that level of scale can be run and managed by a handful of people. That's the gold standard that is out there. So that's why I bring up this slide to tell you what's the art of the possible. Not today, if you are a DevOps person in a largish organization, that's the goal to hit at. You might be on the journey, you might be starting on that journey, but that's something to think about. Yep, that is exactly what I thought when I first read about it. Now, some surveys. We all know DevOps is probably one of the highest paid professions out there today. That's what the 2020 developer survey also talks about. This is no surprise. Everybody knows about it. That's why you are sitting here on a Saturday morning, listening to me and not having, not going out there and hiking or doing some other fun stuff. This is what I really want to talk about. DevOps specialists and SREs are probably the most satisfied with their jobs. And the reason I picked this up, and that's my personal take on why we are most satisfied, is because DevOps gives you the opportunity to work at your comfort level and your true nature. What do I mean by that? In the professional world, I'm an extrovert. In my private world, I'm an introvert. So in the professional world, I like to talk to people. I like to get in front of people. I like to converse with customers. I like to engage with people in the software life, in my professional life. DevOps gives me that opportunity, because through this, I get the medium to talk to various customers, to various analysts, through a lot of people. And that makes me happy. If you are someone who doesn't like talking to a lot of people, you love technology, you want to sit in your corner and crack complex technology problems, this is the space for you. If you're somebody who would need a mix and match of both, this is the place for you. If you're somebody who really likes to experiment on cutting edge stuff, you want to figure out what is latest out there in the market, you want to do proof of concepts, you want to really be at the bleeding edge of technology, this is a space which is evolving very, very fast, and those skills are extremely important. If you're somebody who's research oriented, who wants to do research and who wants to, analyze patterns, data, this is the place for you. In fact, a friend of mine I got to know has done a PhD on DevOps in Pune. I didn't even know such a thing existed in India, but those kind of things are already happening. So even if you are a research oriented person, DevOps will give you the opportunity. So that's my take, my thought on why this is one of the most satisfying career options out there. Okay, so let's come to the meat of it. What is it that you do? Now, this is a very, very simplistic take on the DevOps career path. As you can imagine, depending on the shape, the size, the maturity of the organization that you are working in or you aspire to work in, this career path can change. And there are hundreds of variations of this, but this is one simple take of how I have seen career paths evolve. Sorry. It obviously starts with a DevOps engineer, and I'm just giving you the lay of the land. We'll get a little deeper into this as we go along. So just one line statement of what this profile does. Start with a DevOps engineer. You're basically maintaining pipelines out there, writing very few stuff, but basically essentially maintaining stuff which is already out there. How to start your career in DevOps? As you go along, you get into a senior engineer role. That's where you're probably creating pipelines. It could be on the infrastructure layer. It could be on the serverless layer. It could be on the application layer, but you've started creating pipelines. Now you've started onboarding projects onto it and stuff like that. And then as you mature into an architect, now you've started setting up a DevOps capability. It could be for a team. It could be for a group. You've started defining the standards. You've started defining the process, the policies, all of that. And then a principal architect. As an architect, you have done this for a couple of groups. Now you want to take it to an enterprise level. Could be at the entire enterprise level. Could be if your group is bigger, if you're at a very large company. It could be within one big division. It could be within one very big group. But essentially, at this point between an architect and a principal architect, you have definitely gone across technology stacks. You have gone definitely across multiple tool sets, and that's what is happening at this point. Then as you move along, you become a consultant where you start doing this for multiple enterprises. Now, this could be done for a very, very large enterprise, or if you are in the SI space, if you're in the services, then you're probably doing this across multiple enterprises. And then you come to an evangelist, where you are involved in the bleeding edge architectures, in the bleeding edge tools. You are then thinking about ways of working, setting them up. You're talking about organizational change management, OCM, what new roles and responsibilities can be created. You're talking about stuff like that to enterprises. So this is one high level rough roadmap of how I have seen a DevOps career evolve. Now, of course, there could be multiple stages between all of this, but this is one view. Hopefully, this makes sense. Okay. So how to start building a DevOps career? So we spoke about a DevOps engineer, maintain a DevOps pipeline, you fix a build break, and you're doing continuous automation, maybe on the infrastructure side, maybe on the environment side, maybe on the application side. So that's where you typically start. Ideally, spend a couple of years in this role and gain as much experience as you can. Then as you go along, you're creating a DevOps pipeline, you're onboarding projects into it. You continue to do continuous automation in all of this. If possible, join a startup earlier in the career. It will give you a broader perspective of how things are going. And the DevOps architect, we spoke about this a little bit. Now, if you're at the start of your career, this is something that I always talk about. It's called the principle of love at first sight. 2 sample resumes. These are just pictures I picked up from the internet. Principle of love at first sight is, what is the, all of us know that a recruiter will look at a resume for not more than 10 seconds. He or she will not have the time to read through it. So what is the profile that you can fall in love with? Make a profile that way. Today, there are enough free tools available on the internet, or even a lot of companies which for a very nominal fee can spruce up your resume, can convey what you have done in a very, very attractive manner. Go for it. GitHub, I would recommend everybody on this call to have their own GitHub account and to showcase to the world what you have done. It does not have to be a very, very complicated project. That is fine. I would rather, if a person is coming to me for an interview, I would rather have the person have the confidence to show and give a link to their GitHub account, even if he has 3 simple projects. That is better than not having anything at all. So create a small pipeline, whatever you want to do, put it out there on GitHub, share your code and start talking about it to the world. Show it to interviewers. Just by seeing a GitHub link, it gives me confidence that this person has done something and he or she is willing to share it with the world. That itself tells a lot about you as a person. And no project is a small project. You start with where you are and then you can keep building over it. But start. Second, Stack Overflow. A lot of us go to Stack Overflow to get our answers. And that's perfectly fine. But what I would recommend is dedicate time every single day, 15 minutes, half an hour, dedicate time and start responding to questions. There are obviously a lot of questions that you know the answer to. Take those 10 minutes to respond and start growing on the badges. This is another thing. This will take time. It will take 6 months, a year, 2 years, but this is a very, very fantastic way of showing to the world that you are technically strong. So this is a habit that you get into, but dedicate time every single day. LinkedIn. All of us connect on LinkedIn for different reasons. First, I assume that all of you have a LinkedIn account. If you don't, highly recommend create one. If you don't exist on LinkedIn today, nobody can find you. Then connect to people that post in your interest area. Whatever is your interest area, you will find a lot of people who put meaningful posts there. Engage with them. Just don't say great post. How does it matter? He knows it's a great post. He or she knows about it. Tell them what you liked in that post. Tell them, hey, this interesting point, very, very useful. I used it in my project or I will use it. This particular thing, hey, I never thought about it this way. Great point. Thank you for sharing. Or even better, ask a question. If possible, and if you think you can, contradict the person. But not for the sake of it. If you really think there is something to talk about, but engage. Don't be a victim of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is, who am I to comment on this guy's post? You know, he has 1 million followers. She has been awarded, you know, the most active in this community. Who am I to talk about her? Will he or she even respond to me? You will be surprised that a lot of people do respond to LinkedIn comments. So go ahead, engage with people, but do it genuinely, not, you know, superficially. Twitter, the way I think about Twitter, I consume information on Twitter and then talk more on LinkedIn. But that's just my perspective. You can engage with a lot of people on Twitter as well. So recap, DevOps engineer, senior DevOps engineer, DevOps architect, we've roughly seen what they do. In my mind, the way I have seen careers evolve, there is a fork on the road after this point. What is that? You can turn one or two ways after this. You can go as a principal architect who pushes for DevOps at an enterprise level, who does bleeding edge technology work, basically who sticks to technology, who goes deeper into technology, deeper and wider into technology. The other is a consulting role where you're more talking about the business side of things, where you're more talking about getting into the services industry. Both of these equally lucrative, equally beneficial. It depends on what your personality style is. If you're more of an extrovert, probably consultant. If you're more heavily tech oriented, let me do my own stuff, then the principal architect route. But that's just my way of explaining it. It could be different in your organization where you're coming from. This is just one perspective. And then evangelist, typically they evolve from the services side or having done multiple transformation in multiple large organizations, having worked for large organizations. But what is common amongst all the evangelists out there is that they have repeated the success of DevOps in multiple large organizations. Yep. And then how do you switch your career in DevOps? So let's talk about that. If you're a fresher with less than 5 years experience and you're not in the DevOps area, how do you switch into that, right? So your biggest asset is your enthusiasm to change the world. And I will make a slightly controversial statement here. In the beginning of your career, if you are 2, 3, 4, 5 years experience, do not target a DevOps engineer's profile to start with. And the reason I say that is you need to live the pain of the SDLC in whatever your role you're in. Even if you are a tester, if you are an automation tester, there is some amount of development activity that you can do. Even if you're in support, there are some scripts that you're writing. So live the pain of the SDLC for a couple of years, do some other roles, then you will start appreciating the need and the importance for a DevOps role and the level of change that it brings in. That's just my perspective. You could think differently, but that's what I believe. Do something else for a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years, then morph into a DevOps role. If you're an operations expert and you've done this role for a couple of years, how do you change into DevOps? Couple of questions for you to think about. Have you worked on at least one scripting language and automated something? Do you have exposure to any testing tools? Do you liaise with dev teams and debug production issues? Do you understand monitoring and feedback tools? Have you built solution with the dev teams? So a couple of things to think about and see if you can do this in your setup where you are currently. Now, from an operations expert, there are a couple of things that you can do. If you're on the application side of ops, learn a continuous integration tool and automate your builds and deployments, or whatever area you are in. If you're doing it manually, try and automate it. If it's already automated, figure out what the next level of automation is. There is always a next level of automation in whatever you're doing. Figure out what that is and learn about it. On the infrastructure side, you can learn the Chef, the Puppet, the Ansible, the Kubernetes of the world, and go in that direction. If your organization is on the cloud journey, again, learn the PaaS, the SaaS, the serverless, whatever you're talking about, or learn the cloud native equivalents of the Chef, Puppet, the OpsWorks on AWS, for example. Learn those kind of things. What I'm trying to say is stay in your core competency and figure out what the DevOps equivalent of that is in your organization, in your construct, and learn about it. And that's how you can start making the pivot. If you're a project or a program manager, you already have the experience. The challenge is how to repackage it for this cloud native DevOps world. And I have a couple of perspectives here. If you're a person who's done vendor engagement, if you've handled vendors in the past, if you've dealt with multiple vendors, support, service, stay in that area, read about what is SLAs, read about what is OLAs, and vendor engagement, vendor enablement is a very, very big area. It's the second version of ITIL. Right? So that area itself can be picked up. There's a lot of career growth in that area. Learn about VeriSM. A lot of you might have heard about it. It's picking up well. You can also look at ITIL V4. It talks a lot about Agile, DevOps, Lean. You can also look at the new versions of SAFe. That also talks a lot about these things. So wherever you're coming from, if you're coming from an ITIL background, get to the latest one. If you're from a vendor management background, get there. If you're from a traditional operations background, figure out what the closest equivalent to DevOps is, but don't leave your core. Find the DevOps equivalent of that and then start making the transition. I have seen a lot of people make switches like that and succeed very, very well in their careers. So it is possible. That's what I'm here to tell you. Now, how to scale up your career in DevOps. If you're already in DevOps, if you've been here for a while, what are the couple of things that I can tell you which will help you to scale up your career and to move to an architect, an evangelist, a consultant, and things like that? Attend a lot of conferences. One advantage of the pandemic is that all of the conferences have gone online now. A lot of them are still free. Take advantage of that. The fact that you're sitting here on a Saturday morning is good testament that you're serious about your career. Join such conferences globally on a global scale. Attend a lot of them. Even if you can't attend them in real time, you will get their recordings. All of these guys record. Even this conference has been recorded. Listen to it at your leisure time. A lot of these decks are also available online. You will get access to the deck. This will also, I'll put it up on my speaker deck. You can have a look at this deck later on as well. So attend a lot of conferences. DevOps Institute does a lot of conferences. Skill Up chapters, if you're not familiar with them, these keep happening. Skill Up days keep happening. In India, Niladri's organization does DevOps conference annually. That's another great event to go to. All day DevOps keeps happening. I think it happens every 6 months or so. So that's another fantastic event to get to, devops.com. So the goal of attending a conference, one, to figure out what is happening out there. The second and the most important goal, even bigger than knowing what is out there, is to network. What do I mean by that? You go to the conference, you look at the agenda, you pick up 3 or 4 topics that are of your interest. You connect with the author, you connect with the speaker, you listen to their talk, then you find out that speaker on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw your talk, great talk. These are the 2 things that I didn't understand. Can you tell me a little more? This particular point I loved. This particular point, here is how my organization is doing it. Can you tell me something about it? You will be surprised on how many responses you will get. That's what I mean by network. Network is not, हाँ ये सब बंदों को मैंने LinkedIn पे connect कर लिया. So what? Network is not, hey, I saw your talk. Can you refer me in your organization? That's not network. Network is getting some level of comfortability, building that cache so that you can use it when you need it. Not today. Build that relationship over a period of time. That's my definition of network. There are various ways to do it, of course. Search on influencers, DevOps influencers on Twitter, LinkedIn. I've given a couple of lists. Everybody knows about these guys. They are the famous ones out there, but there are a lot of other people, a lot of people in India, some of them who are on this call, Santanu, Aparna. These are the big DevOps people happening in India. They run the India chapter of DevOps Institute. Connect with them, talk to them, reach out to them on Twitter, LinkedIn. They might be busy, but I'm sure if you are persistent, some of them will respond depending on how their schedules look like. So do a research on DevOps influencers on Twitter. Subscribe to a lot of DevOps blogs. Even if you do a search on top DevOps blogs, you will get a bunch of them. So go through that stuff as well. Ultimately, it's a practice and it's a system that you have to develop. If you have a ton of talks to listen to, if you have a ton of blogs to read, obviously you can't remember everything. Write down some notes. You can start with a simple notepad, use an Evernote, use a complicated system like Notion, Roam, whatever it is. The tools don't matter. I personally use Evernote. I've been using it for a number of years, and I use the web clipper function. And I spent some time on organizing stuff, putting in tags, but that's a practice that I have built. And what I do is every single day, I have blocked 30 minutes for research, whether I do it in the morning, during the daytime, in some boring conference calls, which you have to be there, but you just have to be there. You're not a contributor. You can go in listen mode. So on one screen, I have the conference, the call going on. I know I'm just required to be there. I don't have to be attentive all the time. On the side, I spend 10-15 minutes reading a blog and I highlight stuff. The important point is how do you retrieve this information when you need it? So I use Evernote. You can use any system that you want, but it's a practice, has to be done every single day. And then I've drastically reduced my social media time. your Facebook, your YouTube. That's my way of doing it. You could do it differently. Okay. So here's my experience on what to do in a DevOps interview and how to crack it. First, create a well-seasoned profile. The days of just saying projects, my hobbies, what is my goal of the profile, it's gone. You probably already know about it. When I look at a resume, I'm spending maybe a minute on that, not more than that. And what I'm looking for is, okay, everybody has done some great work in their organization. That's all fine. Other than that, what have you done? Have you written a white paper? Have you spoken somewhere? Are you active on Stack Overflow, GitHub? What's your Twitter handle? What's your area of expertise? So go beyond what you're doing currently and highlight them and spend good amount of time on your profile, one-page profile. Nothing more than that. My almost 22 years of my career, I still have a one-page profile. That's all it takes. If you want to know details of what I did in the projects, talk to me, I'll tell you. But if you're looking at my profile, all you need is one page. That's it. Second, if you're going for an interview, revise your fundamental skill, pick your strength. If possible, figure out who the interviewer is and figure out his or her fundamental skill. Because this is a very, very large topic. You cannot know everything of everything. So you have to pick up a strength which is common to you and your interviewer, right? And announce it. That way, the interviewer will start from that. He or she will also know that skill. You will also know that skill. Chances of you having a good 5-10 minutes initial conversation of cracking it there becomes very high. Instead of saying, you know, I have experience in these 20 things, ask me anything. Narrow it down to your top skill and go as close as possible to the interviewer's skill also, if you can. That'll help, you know, narrow that margin of error. Research the interviewer and the company's profile, right? It's very, very important to spend 30 minutes on checking what the company is. And the reason I say that, towards the end of the interview, almost any good interviewer will ask you, okay, do you have any questions? That's the time when you replay it back. You say, hey, I read about the company. I know that the company does blah, blah, blah. This group that I'm talking to probably does this. This is what I have read. This is what I could gather from the material that is out there. Can you tell me more? That tells me that you are vested, you are interested in this. There will be times when you'll be asked a question which you don't know the answer of. It is okay to say, hey, I don't know. I haven't worked in this, but I have worked in this area which closely relates to this, and this is what I know. It's okay to say that. And when you're completely bowled out, when you have no freaking clue what the question is, I use 2 tricks. Trick number 1, hey, I'm not sure I understand the question correctly. Can you please ask the question again? Or, hey, I still have some doubts on the questions. Can you please phrase the question differently? It's okay to ask that. And you'll be surprised when the question is phrased differently, you might get it. The second trick which I use, I say, hey, there are a couple of answers to this. I'm thinking out loud. Please let me know if it's in the right direction or if it is what you're expecting. And then as you start thinking, you start talking loud. You say, hey, you know, there are a couple of ways to approach this. One way to approach is with this, doing blah, 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 and then which gives me this. And these are the options. This is the approach that I will take. It is not the right answer that I'm looking for as an interviewer. What I'm more interested is in your thought process. And when you start talking loud, I understand your thought process. And if you know how to approach an answer, the technicalities of it, the syntax of it, you can Google it. What's more important for me is your approach. And if you're not 100% sure of what the approach is, talk out your thinking. That helps a lot. Okay, I have 15 minutes more, which I wanted to leave for question and answer. But if I want to leave you with one message at the end of this webinar, it is this. How searchable are you if you type your name on Google? And I heard this in a talk several years ago. That gentleman said that the jobs of the future will be found on your searchability. So when you type your name on Google, do you find a consumer complaint, my favorite pictures of vacation, or do you find technology elements as well? Do I find reference to your blogs written somewhere, your article somewhere, your talk somewhere? That's what I want to leave you with. And this is how I have built it. If this is an actual result, if I search my name, you see one of my first things is probably from 2013. It's a 10-year effort that I've done, conscious effort of building my profile, right? So that is what I would recommend you. And not being a narcissist, but every couple of months, I look up my name on Google and see what is coming up. That's one approach that I believe it has served me well. And I wanted to leave you with that thought. How searchable are you, and what is the content that comes out? Is it your GitHub profile? Is it your projects? Anything. Okay. That's the last one. 15 minutes. Any questions, please?
First, I would like to start off thanking you, Savinder, from the DevOps Institute, and personally as well, that you agreed. And we started the year with some years, and we started with this year with the first note of how do I start my career? It is like, how do I get ahead? The first thing is get started. So I think we've got started, and you touched upon a lot of things. And one thing which struck out very much for me is DevOps is a philosophy, and it's all about people. We could see how, as a person, you connected with just not me, but everybody who's there in the audience today, starting from career, starting from networking, influencing, how do I build a resume, how to be an influencer, what to search on Google. You are a great people's person. That's my takeaway from this. And
thank you.
I had a great time listening to it, but now is the time for questions. But Shantanu, you would like to add something?
Absolutely, Aparna, and thanks a lot, Savinder, for a wonderful Saturday morning. This is, I think, one of the first sessions I'm having in the year 2022, and to have such exciting beginning of 2022 is superb. So, couple of things that was deep down very, very emotional to me as well. That how we actually come from a lot of conventional technologies background. Most of us here. And transitioning to something which is cutting edge is always tough. So someone taking out the time to show you how exactly the milestones of that road are is something that we always needed, but we never got. It's based on our own inclination and the research that we do. So wonderfully crafted, Savinder. I was simply going through the whole pieces myself. It's something I think everybody in this call is going to get benefited from. And we will be publishing this video as well as Savinder's deck. So feel free to reach out to him. I know he's heavily approachable, and he's going to come back to you with any questions that you may have. And the last one, Savinder, the last one is something I fundamentally believe as well, that if you cannot search your brand and be proud of what you are in Google these days, there's something that you still have to rethink about how your brand is. So that's a wonderful closure note. And opening the forum for queries. So I see Pradeep already waiting to ask one. And there are a few open questions I have on the chat from few of you. Feel free to come on the video, just raise your hand and I will introduce you and you can ask Savinder the question that you may have. So I'll start with Pradeep.
Thank you, Santanu. And as I totally agree to what Aparna and Santanu mentioned about Savinder, I was really excited to looking forward for this talk, and really it's worth of time spending. Okay. As you know, I am also one of the ambassador of DevOps Institute. I am also exploring on my career front, doing a lot of things but still I have not developed the confidence where, I still feel that, industry, traditionally service industry, look more at when you approach that I am, want to develop my career in DevOps. They expect the tool, the technicalities. Where person like me, I am not a technical person. I'm not a coder in on day, even a single day, to be very brutal and honest.
Sure.
How I should approach my, job search or career building in DevOps world. I got a lot of points from your talk, but I wanted to hear.
So for private coaching, I can give you my website, which
Definitely,
has my links.
Definitely, I will come.
No, I'm just kidding, man. I'm just kidding. But see, Pradeep, to answer your question very simply, what you have to look at is, I'm assuming you have about between 15 to 20 years of experience under your belt, right?
Yes.
So what you have to now see is, how do you repackage those 20 years into its newer form, right? Because you can't start from scratch. You can't say, I will become a Kubernetes expert. It's not going to happen, because that 10-year, 5-year experience guy is going to kill you at it.
Yes.
So you can't compete with them.
Yes.
Right? What you have to see is, what have you done for 20 years? Put it in 3 or 4 buckets. I've been a project manager. I've been an engagement manager. I have managed customers, whatever you have done, right? Put it in 3 or 4 buckets, and then see how these buckets are relevant in today's world, right? And then figure out that transition map. Because you can't let that 20 years of effort go to waste.
Yeah.
Right? You have to build on top of that. But that will need repackaging it in a different avatar. Right? So I'm happy to connect with you, spend some time with you, and if possible, give you some nuggets, but let's connect, Pradeep. It's a bigger conversation.
Yeah, I understand. Definitely, I will come back.
Sure.
Thank you.
The next one is Alberto. So if Alberto, you can come on video and feel free to ask your question. You have a lot, I know. So it's all back to you.
So thank you, Savinder, and thank you to the team for putting this up. It's very, very, very insightful, very mind-blowing, and simple. Just really well captured. I think you captured the thoughts of a couple of us here. My question, I think Pradeep has taken a few out of my thoughts, right? Because really, like also on the chat, you see people asking, how do we start? I'm not a programmer, I'm not a developer, right? So you now say, how do you start? So at the end of the day, you're asking yourself, because the journey seems to be, looking at your profile, for example, somebody will be threatened at this age, right? I'm not like a young school leaver. How do I start? I think that's a different conversation. And maybe in the future, if you be gracious with your time again, I guess maybe you could run that. How do I start, really? Maybe that's because it's in line with what Pradeep is asking for. The other one is I was asking, though today is my first time of encountering you, will you have a giveaway of your books for us? At least for those of us that have, in Nigeria, this is 7 a.m. I actually woke up quite early because I didn't want to miss it. It's in line with what my career plan. Pradeep has actually been a very good friend and a guide in my journey, right? So I'm happy if I'll have a copy of the book. Straight up.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
So, two questions you asked. How do I start? Now, unfortunately, this question is multi-layered and it has different answers for everybody, right? How do I start for somebody with 5 years experience, with a fresher, with a 10-year, 20-year, with the kind of profile is very, very different, right? There is no standard answer to it. But the guideline that I can give is that if you've already spent time in the industry, you have to figure out your niche in DevOps. What would that be? And that has to build on what you have done in the past. It's a similar answer to what I gave Pradeep also. If you spend some time in the industry, anything upward of 10 years, if you've just spent 4 or 5 years, then it doesn't matter. You can start from scratch. And start from scratch is a different thing, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But if you've spent anything upward of 10 years in the industry, then you've done some stuff in life, right? You have to build on top of that. So figure out what that stuff is, look at what the modern version of that stuff is, and how that fits into the entire DevOps portfolio. That will tell you the North Star. Once you know the North Star, then you can figure out how to get there. For example, if you've been in the ITIL space, if you were an ITIL consultant at some point, look at ITIL V4, look at the new version of Lean, look at those things. They talk about Agile and DevOps. Get certified in them. That's in the same career path that you had taken, right? And then you can go to organizations which are in the process of implementing ITIL and say, hey, I understand this. Take some foundational courses from DevOps Institute or GSDC. There are a lot of them out there, which are not technical, which are not hands-on, but which will give you a concept of what DevOps is, which marries on your background, right? So again, figure out what you've done, put it in buckets, find out the modern version, and then you have to figure out how to get there. That's the general framework which I can give you, but happy to connect with you over LinkedIn and we can have a chat sometime if you want anything specific. Yeah. Second question which you asked, do I have a giveaway? Unfortunately, not at this point, but my book is available on LinkedIn, on Amazon. If you are Amazon, what do they call it? Amazon Kindle Unlimited or something. If you use that, if you have that Kindle account, then it's a free book. Otherwise, also it's some $3 or $4 in whichever currency you operate in. So if you can get up at 7 a.m., then I deserve that cup of coffee, man. Come on, go for the book.
Sure. Sorry, I missed something. When you say
Sure.
continuous delivery, continuous deployment, I've been in sessions where I think someone was saying like continuous delivery. It's continuous deployment. It has to do with something around the pre-prod environment.
Yeah.
That continuous delivery is on the production environment. I'm sort of confused and I'm curious. I really want to know.
Yeah, so see, different people use these terms interchangeably. A lot of literature says continuous deployment is on any environment and continuous delivery is on production. But there is no standard answer to it. If you read, 10 different literatures, you will get probably 4 different answers, right? My personal take is continuous deployment. When you say deployment, you can deploy to any environment. When you say delivery, it means going to the customer. It means releasing on prod. It's just by the English word definition. But that's my take. Some people think differently. There are no standard answers. See, that's the problem with this DevOps world today, right? There is no agile charter which is written, these 10 things, this is the definition. Everybody has their own take. So that's my answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Alberto, for taking out the time today morning.
Thank you.
And thank you, Savinder, for this wonderful answer. I think we can take one last question, if someone has, but I have few open questions on the chat as well. I'll quickly pick up the best one and the most common one that we usually get asked a lot. Somebody coming from a coding background, because there is a perception in the market that everybody entering or transitioning into DevOps, especially the early years, they have to come from a development background. So if somebody who is not proper hands-on in terms of how to code, or they are not the guys who has a fundamental clarity on data structures, how can they think of a career, considering they are not too much deep into experience purview, but they are within the bracket of 5 to 10. So how can they transition and build up a career there?
Oh, that's a great question. So I have a slightly different perspective on the word coding. Coding does not mean I am a Java developer, I am a C# developer. That's pure coder. That's, the gold standard of calling yourself a coder. But coding today is a very vast field. If you are, let's say, a tester, and if you're doing automated testing, then also you can call yourself a coder, because let's understand what's the fundamental thing we are saying. We are saying that you know how to program in one language, any language. You know the concept of programming, you understand the fundamental construct of programming, and you know how you can use programming to automate stuff. That is why we say you should be a programmer. Second thing, you should understand the concept of writing a program, creating a build, deploying it anywhere, right? That is why we think you should come from a programming background. If you're a tester, if you're doing automated testing, if you're using Selenium, API test, or if you're writing programming in any language, that's also a programmer. Even if you are a business analyst, right, and you have been able to distill the art of capturing information from different stakeholders, if you have, I would even be tempted to go as far as to say, if you have done macro programming within Excel, you can still think yourself as a programmer, right? If you've developed some complicated algorithms within Excel, you've done macros, you've done some advanced leveling of Excel stuff. A lot of people do that. You can still think yourself as a programmer, right? My background is Java. After my college, I used to teach Java. I'm very passionate about Java. So in whatever technology I talk today, I always default back to Java, because that's how I understand things. I always go back to, okay, what's my class file? What's my object? What is my RMI, Corba? That is where I'm coming from those days. That's how I understand things. If you understand things in a different concept, that's okay. The important point is for you to have one strong reference point of whatever you're doing, because that's your fundamental, that's your baseline. And then you default back, understand it that way, and then go back to the Kubernetes, to the Ansibles, to whatever you're doing in your world, right? But take a broader perspective of coding. And if you have not done anything ever, go back, look at what you do in a week time, 2 week time, what all activities do you do in a 2 weeks time, make a logbook of it. Like when you go to a dietitian, they tell you to do a diet recall, right? What did I have for breakfast, lunch, dinner, tea? Like that, write everything down that you have done in a 2 week period. Then see how many of these tasks can be automated, right? And then figure out what kind of automation can I put on this. Could be a simple RP automation. So then you start thinking like a coder. It's a slightly long answer to probably a simpler question, but that's how I would explain that.
That's indeed a great answer, Savinder, because I know most of the questions that we usually have on how do we pivot to a career in DevOps is always something which commands to understand where they are sitting right now at, and what kind of a texture in terms of DevOps they feel they know. So it's always a deeper conversation, but I'm glad that almost Pradeep, Alberto, and a few of the chat answers, and a few of the chat questions have been answered. So Anyone, if you have any questions, and people watching this video, if you feel you need any clarity on how do you transition to a successful DevOps career, Savinder is just one text away in LinkedIn, and I hope you can freely reach out to him. He is obviously going to come back to you helping on this career journey. With that, it's already due 12:30. Thanks a lot, Savinder, again for taking out your time today morning and making this first event of 2022 for DevOps Institute India chapter a good hit. I'm happy that we can start our 2022 with such a good note, and we will expect a couple of more series from you in the year 2022 to help our to help our ambassadors of India chapter move ahead and do something great this year. With that, thank you for being here today, and thank you everyone for participating in this morning call. Wishing you all the success, good health.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, nice one.